I'm Dr. Duke. Glad to be with you today. And boy, it seems every time I join you, there is another big scandal of American life. And now we have the scandal of the Brett Kavanaugh Redux story, right? That the progressive left is not happy, and they're looking for ways to distract America, I think. I think the New York Times decided to print bogus stories about Brett Kavanaugh without really evidence, by withholding exculpatory evidence that would have made Brett Kavanaugh look better, by keeping from the American people the complete story. They had to know on some level, the New York Times, that they were trying to do this, I think, to distract from the Democrat debate that just took place. It's not a coincidence in my mind that within 4 or 5 days of the last Democrat debate, you have this bombshell that the New York Times throws as this grenade they throw right into the middle of American discourse. And it worked. No one is talking about that despicable and laughable performance by the 10 Democrat candidates in the last debate. And that's good for Democrats, I suppose, in the sense that we've stopped talking about Beto's gun grab. We've stopped talking about Joe Biden's inability to remember how many people are in the country. I mean, my goodness, he is making the gaffes of George W. Bush and Barack Obama, 57-state Barack, look absolutely professorial in his inability, Joe Biden, to remember simple basic details. You've got the shrill Elizabeth Warren talking out of pale-faced speak out of both sides of her mouth. You've got all these problems with the Democrat candidates, but now we're talking about Kavanaugh again. We've wrenched the discussion away from their disgustingly bad performance and how bad they will be for the country based on what they're telling you now. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. We've wrenched the discussion, at least for this week, back to Kavanaugh and back to trying to delegitimize Brett Kavanaugh, even after the fact. And other people have pointed this out as well, but I thought of this immediately. The entire attack on Kavanaugh the first time around had nothing to do with sexual assault. It had everything to do with abortion rights. The entire purpose of trying to smear Kavanaugh was to protect Roe versus Wade. And which is really kind of interesting when you think about it. The progressive left realizes that Roe versus Wade, which is really bad constitutional law, even many liberal scholars, legal scholars, have to admit that Roe versus Wade was poorly argued and poorly decided. It was not by any means a Supreme Court worthy type of legal enterprise. It's a pretty weak, but it's weak applesauce, to tell you the truth. And again, even progressives recognize that. But the progressives want to keep Roe versus Wade at the national level. It's not a law. It's just an opinion. But they want to keep it because they recognize that if you do what should have been done originally, allow the states to decide the fate of abortion in each state, that more states would have banned it outright than would have supported it outright. And what they want is a national network of abortion. They're so angry that states like Alabama or states like the southern states are fighting back and trying to protect unborn life. It just drives them crazy. In states like New York, they pass laws protecting abortion all the way through the moment a child's being born. And when a different state uses its state authority to pull back on abortion, you begin to see why Roe versus Wade is so important to them. It gives them a federal framework, if not an outright law, that allows the federal government and federal judges to begin to stop conservative states from enacting laws that restrict abortion while granting greater latitude for radically liberal states like California and Massachusetts and New York to radically expand abortion under the umbrella of Roe versus Wade. So all this Kavanaugh stuff is nothing more than a shill and a cover for the abortion lobby. In fact, a new book by Molly Hemingway and a co-author came out just recently, within a week or two, and it argues specifically that everything that Brett Kavanaugh went through in his about exactly 1 year ago, everything he was going through a year ago to get appointed to the Supreme Court, the entire premise of it was to protect radical abortion rights. We actually have one of the lawyers for Kathleen Blasey Ford, who actually came out and said, well, kind of wink, wink, whether the story was true, the fact is that it was a useful process, she said, because it's going to make it much harder for the Supreme Court in general and for Brett Kavanaugh in particular to be able to oppose abortion rights or possibly even to strike down Roe versus Wade. She was very Machiavellian, very cavalier, and very blunt about it. that it doesn't really matter is the gist of what she was saying, this lawyer. Didn't matter if the case, if Blasey Ford didn't prove her case or if he still got appointed. The benefit of the whole procedure was to try to kneecap Brett Kavanaugh with response to abortion rights. And, you know, in a way, Kavanaugh's a Catholic, and there was some evidence in his past jurisprudence that maybe he would be suspicious of Roe versus Wade. And it's abominable, and it's un-American, and it's frustratingly childish. But from a purely Democrat point of Democrat strategery, I understand why they're doing it. I mean, think about the degree to which John Roberts, who everyone was terrified about when he was appointed by George W. Bush, he made it on the Supreme Court. He became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Everybody thought, you know, he's going to be ruling right wing. He's going to be this radical right winger, and he's nothing of the sort. In fact, you could actually argue that, as has happened so often with Supreme Court judges, when you get to the Beltway, the huge pressure of the liberal media, the huge pressure of big national lobbyists in Washington, D.C., tends to move conservative judges left. You know, you almost never see a circumstance where a radically liberal Supreme Court appointee, and that includes the ones on the court now, Sotomayor, you never see a liberal justice move right. It's almost always the liberal permissive culture, the radical progressive culture of D.C. pushes conservative justices to the left. It's never the other way. And Roberts is a key player in this. You look at the history of John Roberts and you say to yourself, he's a Republican? Wait, you're telling me a Republican president appointed that guy? So there's good reason to believe somebody like Brett Kavanaugh will. And there's not been a Supreme Court nominee since the time of Bork, right? In the 1980s, who's experienced the kind of withering confirmation hearing that Kavanaugh did. And so consequently, that is the question. Is all of this going to spook him? Is it going to – he's been very quiet, which is smart. He's not responded. He's not defended himself. He's not tried to justify his own positions. He's not even calling out what is so obviously a witch hunt. He's being very judicial. He is laying back. He has been appointed. He's not going to be impeached. He's not going to be forced off. But it does beg the question. He's a human being. Is Brett Kavanaugh going to get angry at the activists, which might influence his jurisprudence, might make him more likely to be skeptical of abortion cases? And there are a number of big ones that are going to be, and almost all of them involve Planned Parenthood, that are going to be coming before the Supreme Court. Or will it do the opposite? Will Brett Kavanaugh, for lack of a better word, be John Roberts? Will he be cowed and bullied? Will he be post-traumatic stress disordered into moderating or even maybe recusing himself from issues of abortion because of all of this nonsense? It is a very, very frustrating tactic from the left. And it's one, I will say honestly, that you never see at this level from Republicans when they're grilling Democrat appointees to the Supreme Court. And one of the reasons why is because the media is so lockstep in line, particularly the Beltway media is so lockstep in line with progressive values, especially when it comes to the murderous abortion industry. And so it was another play in American politics. There's all sorts of reasons we should be very nervous about this. You are trying to unseat a legitimately appointed, incredibly qualified, eminent jurist without any due process and without any real evidence. In fact, the New York Times and other outlets have picked this up, and you've got Democrat candidates irresponsibly repeating these claims, calling for the impeachment of Kavanaugh on the basis of factually inaccurate, one-sided evidence, articles written by outlets like the New York Times and then magnified through the rest of the media. And then there's exculpatory evidence. There are all sorts of exculpatory pieces of evidence that could have mediated the impact of this story, but the New York Times just simply did not print them. This means a great deal to a constitutional republic. It is suggesting that everything, every rule of law and order, every precedent, every amendment, every aspect of the Bill of Rights can be compromised if you don't think progressively. You can be lied about. You could be smeared. Freedom of press, right? You can be smeared by the press under the First Amendment because they don't like your politics. This is a very dangerous time and place. I think Brett Kavanaugh wins this. I think that his silence is smart. I think the New York Times is getting a big black eye. I think the media in general is being laughed at. But don't forget the process here. What you can do, Brett, is be faithful to your values, Brett Kavanaugh. Vote the way you would have voted, and don't let them scare you away from a serious reconsideration of Roe versus Wade. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and this has been my take on the news.